Mr. Ambassador, welcome to CCTV International and congratulations on the 55th anniversary of Sino-India diplomatic relationship. Now, please tell us about business relationship. What do you see the business potential?
55th anniversary will begin with a very important visit, a state visit by the Premier of China to India later this month. It's a visit for which I will also be accompanying the Premier, and we expect some very useful results to emerge from the visit, a new milestone in our bilateral relations, including on the economic side. Especially so on the economic side because the Premier is accompanied by a large business delegation. There will also be the report of the joint study group which will be presented to the two Prime Ministers, and this deals, as you know, with the trade and economic issues. The study group was expected to draw up a program for 5 years on the basis of complementarities between our economies, and this report has been prepared, will be presented to the Prime Ministers, who will then decide what to do with it. But to answer your question about where we have gone, we've gone a long way in the last 5 years particularly. I keep coming back to 5 years because there's been a major change, I think, since the beginning of 2000 in our relations. And in trade, we have now, according to Chinese statistics, reached a level of $13.6 billion last year. Now, considering that we were just at about $3 billion in 2000, you can see how rapid the growth has been. And I would say the trade is essentially balanced. The problem before us now is how can we sustain such high growth rates? In the last 2 years, for instance, growth rates have been over 70%. Now, as the base becomes bigger, you can't sustain such a large growth rate. But if we can sustain a high growth rate, we need to change certain things. We need to make our export baskets more broad-based. We need to have much more trade facilitation between our two sides. We need to have much more information exchanges. And happily, all this is happening. So I personally believe that to have a bilateral trade figure of $20 billion by 2010 or perhaps even earlier is feasible on a sustainable basis.
Perhaps you could name a few industries or major projects that are under collaboration right now.
We have noted that Chinese companies are largely interested in infrastructure projects in India, where they believe they have strengths, in power projects, doing road construction projects, building bridges and stuff like that. And they are gradually getting more projects in these areas. They have to compete against international competition, and they have succeeded. And what will happen now is that people will see how well they implement these projects. Are they implemented in a timely fashion? If that happens, they will get more projects. Indian companies are focusing on their strengths in the Chinese market, including in the IT sector, in chemical products, in export of yarn, etc. And we are now looking at China as a manufacturing base for our companies. Many Indian companies have invested in China. The numbers in terms of value is not very high. It's over $100 billion of investment. But the process has begun, and some very big Indian names are already in China, including, for instance, the Kumaramangalam Birla Group, Ranbaxy, the Tatas. And I believe that more and more Indian companies will come to China and invest in China.
With high growth rate, these two Asian giants right now are facing probably similar challenges. What are the most challenging fields here you are looking at?
The biggest challenge for both China and India is development. And I have for long maintained that for China, the best example is India, and for India, the best example is China. Why do I say that? I say that because we have extremely large rural populations. We have similar socio-economic conditions. We are the two largest developing countries, fast growing economies. We are both raw material deficient to some extent. In some extent, we are deficient in critical raw materials like energy. Now, where do we go from here? The best is to learn from each other's experiences, to collaborate with each other. So we have many, many similarities. And what do we want to do? We want to take several 100 million people in our countries out of the trap of unemployment and poverty. Is there any other country which offers us a parallel? No. When you have several 100 million people in the rural sector, we have several 100 million people in the rural sector. This is more than the population of most countries. So we have to learn from each other's experiences. Even though our developmental systems, Our political systems are different, but the socio-economic differences, similarities are so great that we have to cooperate and learn from each other.
Do you see them as more competitors or collaborators?
Yeah, this is a question I'm asked all the time, but I'm a little surprised I'm asked this question. Don't two Chinese companies in the same sector compete with each other? Competition is part of the market. Competition is good, competition is healthy, but it does not mean that competition will be the dominant feature and that cooperation will be in the backside. No, I think there will be more cooperation, but there will also be competition between Indian and Chinese companies.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for meeting with our audience.
Thank you very much.